investigations. Okay, so we were at the stage of investigating a case of postmenopausal bleeding. Now, so apart from the history taking and physical examination of the patient, we are doing some specific investigations like ultrasound, then pap smear, cervical punch biopsy, endometrial biopsy to know the cause for the postmenopausal bleeding. Now in ultrasound, what is the importance of doing ultrasound in a case of postmenopausal bleeding? What all conditions can you diagnose by ultrasound? Can you tell me? See, if you see the etiology, these are the etiologies for postmenopausal. So out of all these, ultrasound will help you to diagnose which all conditions. Tell me, what all conditions can you diagnose by doing ultrasound in this case of postmenopausal bleeding?
Carcinoma of endometrium, ma'am.
Yes.
Atrophy of endometrium.
Okay, so whether it is endometrial hyperplasia is there or not, or it is only an atrophied endometrium. So by measuring endometrial thickness, you will have an information about the condition called endometrial hyperplasia, which is causing postmenopausal bleeding, or it is atrophic endometritis that is causing postmenopausal. Yes. What else? What else does ultrasound help you to diagnose as a cause?
Fibroids, ma'am.
Carcinoma.
Okay,
Ovaries.
fibroid uterus. What happens to fibroid in menopausal women? What happens to the fibroid that was there? Suppose she's around 42 years diagnosed with a 6 centimeter intramural fibroid. Okay. By 45, she reached menopause. I'm just giving an example. A woman at 42 years of age was diagnosed to have a fibroid of 7 centimeters. It is present in the intramural part of the uterus. She reached menopause by 45 years. That means 3 years later. What will happen to the fibroid? What will happen to the fibroid once a woman reaches menopause? Tell me. What is the etiopathogenesis, or what is causing fibroid to develop? Is it hormone dependent or hormone independent benign tumor? Did you understand my question or no? Because one of your friends told fibroid, if it is there, we can pick it up by ultrasound. That's the reason I started asking this question. What effect does menopause have on the size of fibroid? Anybody? Okay. If you don't want to answer, I will also not tell anything. Okay. So this is how the pap smear kit will look like. So last time I already told you about the technique of doing the pap smear. Okay. So you require all these instruments apart from your Cusco specula. Are you all there, or you lost connectivity with me?
Yes, ma'am, we are there.
Yes, ma'am, we are there.
Then you tell me, is fibroid a hormone dependent tumor, or hormones don't have any effect on fibroid? Just tell yes or no. Is fibroid growing under the influence of hormones or not?
Yes, ma'am. Hormone dependent.
Yes, ma'am.
So when the woman reaches menopause, what happens to the size of fibroid? What happens to the hormones in menopausal women?
Estrogen levels decrease, ma'am.
Progesterone?
FSH increases, ma'am.
Progesterone?
Progesterone also decreases, ma'am.
So what happens to fibroid then? Size of fibroid?
It shrinks, ma'am.
Then to get this answer, I had to give so many clues. Very good. Excellent. So this is the pap smear or cervical cytology. That's a mandatory test to diagnose, especially the cervical lesions like the cervical carcinoma, which is supposed to be a very common cause of postmenopausal bleeding. So this pap smear will be dealt with again in the chapter of cervical cancer. So I'm not going to go into those details of how you evaluate that pap smear cytology and all that. I will not go into those details. Now next, another minor procedure that you may need to do to confirm the cause for postmenopausal bleeding is a cervical punch biopsy. Okay, so from the ectocervix, which is the site for the development of squamous cell carcinoma of the cervix, you will take a punch. So this cervical punch biopsy forceps looks like this. So there is a at one end you have a cachet to hold the instrument. At the other end there is a like a tip with a depression and a serrated edge. So when you hold any tissue in between these two limbs of this tip and lock this cachet, the tissue will get teased off. It gets punched out, and then like that you will get a bit of cervical tissue for sending it for histopathological examination. So that is how the cervical punch biopsy is done. So with the cachet and lock, once you get a hold of a bit of cervical tissue, you will tease it out and take it and send it to the histopathology examination by putting this tissue in formalin. Okay. So usually we prefer to take the biopsy from the abnormal area or unhealthy looking area on the ectocervix. Like if the cervix is having some growth, you take the biopsy from that area, or the cervix is looking very much unhealthy in the form of red color cervix or a raised area on the cervix is there. Then also you take the biopsy from those abnormal areas. That is cervical punch biopsy. Another way of taking a cervical biopsy is cone biopsy, where with a scalpel blade, you take a cone-shaped tissue, okay, from the ectocervix, and the base of this cone, see like this, a cone-shaped tissue is excised with the help of a scalpel blade, and the base of this cone is usually the ectocervix part of the cervix, and then the apex will be the area inside the cervical canal. So like this, you take a cone-shaped biopsy, and then again this is also a tissue that is to be sent to the pathologist for histopathological examination to exclude the presence of any malignancy. So like this, we have cervical punch biopsy and cone biopsy as a diagnostic procedure to confirm the cervical lesions as a cause for postmenopausal bleeding. Then apart from this, you also know that uterus also has to be evaluated to know the cause for postmenopausal bleeding. So you have done ultrasound, then you proceeded for pap smear. Then if required, you also do a cervical punch biopsy, and then you proceed to evaluate the endometrium. So one by one, serially, you will be doing all these investigations till you know as to what is the cause for postmenopausal bleeding. So for taking the uterine endometrial sample or taking the endometrial biopsy, you either do a procedure called fractional curettage, or you do something called endometrial aspiration cytology. Either of these procedures can be done. Now, this fractional curettage and endometrial aspiration cytology are blind procedures. That means you are not visualizing anything inside the uterine cavity. You are just blindly passing the instruments and taking a tissue bit. But under vision also you can take these endometrial biopsies. How? By doing a diagnostic hysteroscopy. So you have an endoscopic procedure called hysteroscopy. So this is the hysteroscopy instrument. Okay, there's a camera attached, and then there's a cannula accommodating this camera, and then you are passing it into the uterine cavity, and through a side channel actually you are injecting fluid, okay, a normal saline or a ringer lactate, and this fluid will distend the uterine cavity. See, usually you all know that the uterine cavity has collapsed walls. Collapsed walls means uterine cavity is not like an intestine or a stomach which is ballooned out or having some always in a distended position. It is always in a collapsed position if there is no content. Collapsed position means the anterior posterior walls are opposed to each other. Same way, the lateral walls of the uterus are also opposed to each other. So there is no fluid filled or a space-like thing inside the uterine. It's only a dead space. So you want to visualize the endometrial lining means you have to distend this uterine cavity so that the walls will move away from each other, and then only you can visualize the endometrial cavity. So this distension, this visualization can be done by injecting a fluid medium through this scope only, and this fluid is usually a isotonic saline or a ringer lactate, which will push the walls away and make you to visualize the endometrial lining through this scope. Okay, so that is how hysteroscopy is done. So since you are using this hysteroscope instrument for diagnosing a condition or diagnosing any abnormality in the endometrial lining, it is called as a diagnostic hysteroscopy. Because you also have something called therapeutic hysteroscopy, where this hysteroscope is provided an extra channel to do some procedures. Okay? So, but for investigative purposes, for taking an endometrial biopsy and for visualizing the uterine cavity for any lesion, just diagnostic hysteroscopy is sufficient. Okay. So, in-depth hysteroscopy will be covered in another chapter of endoscopic procedures in gynecology in another session. So I just told the basics of hysteroscopy. I will not go into the details or indications for hysteroscopy, but just I introduced you that in postmenopausal bleeding also there is a place for doing diagnostic hysteroscopy. Hystero meaning is uterus. Scopy is any instrument that you are passing inside, any scope or any instrument that you are passing into a cavity and visualizing. Then, apart from fractional curettage and endometrial aspiration cytology, you also have another procedure called endometrial suction curette. Okay. So, this endometrial suction curette can also be used where you are sucking out the contents of the uterine cavity by creating a negative pressure. So those sucked out contents will have some endometrial cells, and that you will send it to the pathologist for histopathological examination to rule out any malignancy. That is the way you get a tissue. So these are all different techniques of obtaining an endometrial biopsy. That is what you should know. Whether it is fractional curettage or an endometrial aspiration or an endometrial suction curette or using an endometrial brush, all these methods are only basically used to suck out some endometrial tissue or to take a biopsy of the endometrium and send it to the histopathologist for examination. Now there are different names for this suction curette or aspiration. It could be a Pippel aspirator. So like this it will be. Pippel aspirator means it's a very fine cannula like this, a plastic cannula. Okay, attached to a syringe where you create a negative pressure and then suck out the contents. Or it could be a Vabra aspirator where it is a metal cannula. Okay, metal cannula will be there and there is a syringe to which a negative pressure is created either with a syringe or by electrical suction machine. So you will have uterine contents aspirated through this and you will send it to the histopathologist. So it could be Vabra aspirator or a Pippel aspirator. So Pippel aspirator is a very thin tube like this. A plastic tube only is used and the negative pressure is created by using a syringe. Or just like your cyto brush, which I showed you for pap smear, no? See here we have the cyto brush. This is one cyto brush and this is a cyto broom to take these cells from the endocervical canal. Same way you also have something called a endometrial brush. That means a very fine plastic instrument with a brush like one end will be having some bristles like a brush, and then you just pass it into the uterine cavity and rotate it in a 360-degree fashion. So those fine bristles will just scrape the cells from the endometrial lining, and those cells will get collected on that brush, and then you take out the brush and insert it into a fixative, then send it to the histopathology for examination. So like that you can collect the cells even by using this endometrial brush. Okay, so these are all different ways of doing a endometrial biopsy sampling. Now, if you see a little bit in detail, I'll talk about the fractional curettage. Now, fractional curettage is a type of endometrial curettage or endometrial biopsy where it is done under a anesthesia or under IM sedation. Okay, you can do this fractional curettage or an endometrial biopsy. It's a type of an endometrial biopsy which you can do either under IM sedation or under anesthesia. Anesthesia could be again general anesthesia for the patient, or it could be only a local anesthesia. Okay, what are we doing in this fractional curettage is usually the position of the patient will be lithotomy position. Lithotomy position is, what is lithotomy position? Anybody? Anybody, can you tell me what is lithotomy position? What's the normal position for gynec examination?
Dorsal position, ma'am.
Yeah. So in dorsal position, how is the patient lying down?
Supine with knees flexed and hips
Yes.
also flexed.
Yes. Where are the feet? Where are the feet placed?
On the table only, ma'am.
Yeah. So on the exam, so the feet are resting on the examination table, and the lower limbs are flexed at the hip joint as well as at the knee joint. Okay, that is the normal dorsal position which we use for examining a patient in the gynec OPD, where you want to do a speculum exam. But if you're doing some procedures on the vagina, cervix, uterus, this dorsal position will not give enough space. You may have to have good relaxation of the pelvic muscles so that you have adequate space for passing the instruments and doing the procedure. So we use lithotomy position. So as your friend told, good doctor, you have told it correctly. So in lithotomy position, again the lower limbs are flexed at knee joint and hip joint, but the feet are not resting on the table. The lower limbs are actually supported in stirrups. See, all this again will be repeating. You can see pictures and all that in another session on endometrial. Apart from these investigations, we also have to do some other investigations like cystoscopy. I told among one of the causes for postmenopausal bleeding is a urethral caruncle or a bladder carcinoma. So you also may have to do a cystoscopy. Not only that, cystoscopy will also help you to know whether cervical cancer is extending into the bladder. Okay, so extension of cervical cancer also you can make out. So even for that, you will do cystoscopy. What is cystoscopy? It is nothing but again an endoscopic visualization of the bladder. So you are passing one small scope into the bladder, urinary bladder, and then visualizing the lining for any involvement of the bladder mucosa or bladder wall by malignancy or by any other abnormal growth which is causing bleeding. Proctoscopy, again proctoscopy is a small instrument that is passed into the anal canal and into the rectum to visualize again rectal lining, rectal mucosa, and for any abnormalities So these are other investigations to know the other pelvic organs causing postmenopausal bleeding. So this is how you will evaluate the woman with postmenopausal bleeding. See, postmenopausal bleeding is multifactorial. There are many conditions causing postmenopausal bleeding. So all the investigations that you are doing, the routine investigations, special investigations that you're doing, will help you to exclude one by one and come to an ultimate diagnosis. So based on that condition, your further management will depend. So that is the reason, if you see the management of postmenopausal bleeding, there is nothing like a universal management for all the dozen conditions that I told you in my previous slides. You will, depending on the cause or the condition causing it, you will treat. Okay. So the management, that is the reason is said of postmenopausal bleeding as treatment of the cause. Whichever condition is causing, you treat that condition, the patient will have relief of the postmenopausal bleeding. Suppose there is no cause found. That means, in spite of doing all the investigations, you found that you are not able to explore or get any condition causing, specific condition causing postmenopausal bleeding. And again, it is only a one bout or the very first bout of bleed. Afterwards, she is not having any recurrent episodes. Then you can just put the patient on observation. So you're just managing the patient conservatively. You are not giving any active treatment. You're just observing her. You may ask her to report immediately if she has a second bout or persistent bleeding. So that is how you will manage the case. Suppose if she has recurrent episodes of bleeding, she comes back after 2-3 months saying, doctor, again I'm having on and off bleeding, but there's no specific cause. Then you can simply proceed off for abdominal hysterectomy. Okay. So the surgery is the treatment of choice if there is a recurrent episodes of bleeding. There is nothing like medications to be given to control the bleeding. All that you will do is a definitive surgery in the form of hysterectomy. Again, that hysterectomy is an abdominal hysterectomy. TAH stands for total abdominal hysterectomy. Along with that, you are also removing both the ovaries and both the tubes. So, total abdominal hysterectomy plus bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy is a treatment of choice for these patients. Bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy. Okay. So, for recurrent episodes of postmenopausal bleeding, the preferred treatment of choice is only total abdominal hysterectomy with the bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy. Then you subject these specimens for final histopathological examination and for the final diagnosis. Okay. Then, suppose if she also has simple endometrial hyperplasia as the cause with no other malignancy or any other underlying picture, then also the treatment of choice will be simple abdominal hysterectomy with the bilateral salpingo-oophorectomy. So that is a treatment of choice. Then, what about conditions like atrophic vaginitis and atrophic endometritis? Now, these are again actually a sequelae of menopausal changes. There is no pathological event causing these atrophic vaginitis and endometritis. It is only the deficiency of the hormones leading to these two conditions. And as a result, there is on and off postmenopausal bleeding. So in these conditions also, the patient can simply be subjected to observation. You are not doing any active management. You are just observing for her because it will spontaneously resolve her. Okay. Or at the most, you may require to advise some local creams, local hormone creams, or some local soothing agents. Okay. Healing agents. So in atrophic vaginitis and atrophic endometritis, it is only the observation as a treatment of choice. So with this, I finished the topic of, completed the topic of postmenopausal bleeding.